This is the premiership.
7 weeks after Malcolm Turnbull announced his big play on schools funding, it's game time.
This week the Senate will have the chance to put in place fair, consistent, needs-based funding for Australian schools.
The Education Minister's good hands will be crucial in one of the most important weeks in the life of the Turnbull government. If he can snatch a deal on the so-called Gonski 2.0 schools funding model, it would be Exhibit A in Malcolm Turnbull's determination to get things done.
We really want to see this dealt with this week because it's important for Australian schools who are budgeting for next year over the coming months to have the certainty.
This government's priorities are out of touch and all wrong.
With Labor hostile, how does the government put a go in Gonski? There are two paths available. Neither are easy, especially when a retiring Liberal senator might use his final week in Parliament to be a spoiler.
Unfortunately, until I'm convinced that the proposals in place will not disadvantage Catholic schools and independent schools for that matter, then I've indicated to the Minister that obviously please don't make me vote against the government in my last week in the Senate.
More chaos and division in the coalition on the Gonski funding.
There are some small technical issues that Senator Chris Back and I are having discussions over, but I am confident that we will have support within the government's ranks to deliver the needs-based funding that Australian schools deserve.
The first path for government is to corral 10 votes from the crossbench, or 11 if Senator Back crosses the floor. That's easier said than done.
I got a number of areas I'm not happy about.
Although there's some reason for hope.
Let's not let toxic politics get in the way of good policy that will benefit our students.
The second path, potentially much less fiddly for the government, is to do a deal with the Greens, who have 9 votes in the Senate.
We're going to be doing everything that we can to ensure that it is public schools and our public kids across the country that get the best possible outcome.
So here's where it stands. The Greens have been offered everything they want by the government. $5 billion extra funding, delivered over 6 years, not 10, a carve-out for the Northern Territory, an independent watchdog and a mechanism to make sure the states don't shirk their funding share. You'd think then that the Greens would support the package, and you'd be wrong. They won't support the Turnbull government's legislation unless the powerful Australian Education Union gives them the green light.
I've heard the concerns from the Teachers Union in relation to the Turnbull package as it was tabled, and I share them. 10 years is far too long. It isn't enough money, and it doesn't match what was kind of promised without ever being legislated under the Gillard government.
The Greens education spokeswoman, Sarah Hanson-Young, says while the government's model isn't perfect, it's closer to David Gonski's original design.
The model itself is closer to needs-based funding, but it won't mean a thing if we don't give those public schools the best chance by putting in more money.
I think some of your colleagues also do not want the optics of the Greens doing a deal with the government. Is that true?
I think there's always, in this place, an element of weighing up what is the machinations of the politics in Parliament. But the thing that the Greens have before us right now is an opportunity to make sure we make the focus on those public schools, and every single one of my colleagues are doing that.
Putting that rhetoric aside, I understand the majority of your party room side with you and Richard Di Natale in thinking that the offer's good. True?
I think everyone is looking at the details of what has been what we've been advocating for and what we're talking to the government about. But Andrew, it's a negotiation, and we've still got some way to go. We're not going to be pressured into just signing up to something for the sake of it. We've got to get a good deal for public schools.
But if the AEU says it's a good deal, you'll sign it?
I would like to think, and I am encouraged and hopeful, that the problems that the Teachers Union have found in Malcolm Turnbull's package, the problems we've seen in the package, they align. And if we can find ways to overcome them, we should work together.
The opposition is continuing to push the line that the government's plan is billions short of what Labor promised to spend on schools.
How is it fair
that this government is cutting $22 billion from schools but is giving millionaires a tax cut in just 12 days' time.
He used to speak about David Gonski as though he was a secular saint. He said, I give a Gonski with all the empathy of such a compassionate man, but then he was exposed. Then then I ruined it, says the member for Sydney. Oh dear, yes. Yes, it did rather ruin it for you when David Gonski called you out.
The Education Union is playing a dirty game. Its federal president, Karina Haythorpe, was in Canberra today, but she hid from the cameras, despite her union declaring it the Gonski Day of Action. The union is doing Labor's bidding by threatening to rain hell on the Greens if they back the government's plan. Lots of teachers are Greens members, so it's a potent threat. We're witnessing another failure from our political system. After Labor vacated the field, the Greens extracted major concessions from the government, only to fold in the face of heavying from a union that doesn't want to surrender its most effective campaign. The week has begun with the interests of Australia's school children coming second to rank political opportunism.